If you disappeared, no one would notice. My wife said it laughing at our backyard barbecue, humiliating me in front of friends. She had no idea I was a judicial enforcement officer who knew exactly how to make people vanish. Legally. Challenge accepted. Allison. Let's see who disappears first. My name is Michael Fleming. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years as a judicial enforcement officer for the county court system. Basically, I'm the guy who shows up at your door when you don't pay your debts or ignore court orders. I serve papers, execute judgments, and make sure justice gets its due. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well and taught me everything I needed to know about property law, asset protection, and how to disappear money when someone doesn't want to pay up. The night everything changed started like any other Saturday in our suburban paradise. Allison had organized one of her famous backyard barbecues. Our house in Maple Ridge was perfect for entertaining, with its wraparound deck and manicured lawn that cost me more per month than most people's car payments. The guest list was the usual suspects, her Pilates instructor friends, some neighbors, and her sister Janet, who always looked at me like I was something she'd scrape off her designer shoes. I was manning the grill, flipping burgers, and keeping my mouth shut while the women gossiped about whose husband was having a midlife crisis. Our 17-year-old son Benjamin was upstairs in his room, probably gaming with his headphones on, blissfully unaware of the adult drama unfolding below. Michael's such a creature of habit, Allison announced to the group, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound affectionate, but really meant boring. She was on her third glass of wine, holding court near the outdoor fireplace. Same breakfast every morning, same route to work, same everything. If he disappeared tomorrow, honestly, no one would even notice. The laughter that followed hit me like a physical blow. These people, our supposed friends and neighbors, were cackling at my expense. Janet raised her glass and said, "Allison, you're terrible." But she was laughing too. I kept flipping burgers, my jaw tight, watching the grease sizzle and pop. The meat hissed against the hot grates, and I found myself thinking about how easy it would be to just walk away from this grill, this house, this life where I'd somehow become invisible. I mean, he's reliable, Allison continued, clearly enjoying her audience. But reliable is just another word for predictable, right? When's the last time Michael surprised anyone? I set down my spatula and turned around. The conversations died as I walked over to the group. Allison looked up at me with those blue eyes that used to make my heart skip, but now they just looked cold and calculating. Challenge accepted, I said quietly, meeting her gaze. She blinked, confused. What? I didn't repeat myself. Instead, I walked back to the grill, finished cooking the food, and served everyone their burgers with a smile. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The reliable, predictable Michael Fleming had just received his walking papers, and I was already planning my response. That night, long after the guests had gone home and Allison had passed out in her bedroom, I sat in my home office surrounded by case files and legal precedents. My computer screen glowed in the darkness as I opened a new folder and labeled it simply, Exit Strategy. The Monday morning after the barbecue, I sat in my office at the county courthouse, staring at a stack of foreclosure papers that needed serving. But my mind wasn't on work. It was on the look in Allison's eyes when she dismissed me like yesterday's news in front of our friends. I pulled out my personal laptop and opened a new spreadsheet. If 15 years of marriage had taught me anything, it was that Allison never read the fine print. Every mortgage refinance, every joint account, every major purchase, she'd sign where I pointed and trust me to handle the details. That trust was about to become her biggest mistake. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison. Forgot to mention, going to Janet's spa weekend this Friday. Watch Benjamin. Just like that. No discussion, no asking if I had plans. Just an order disguised as information. I walked down the hall to visit my colleague Sarah in property records. Sarah had been with the county for 20 years and knew where every document was buried. "Hey Sarah," I said, leaning against her desk. "I need to pull some old filings from my personal account. Marriage trust documents from about 8 years ago." "Sure thing, Michael," Sarah replied, typing on her computer. "What's the case number?" I gave her the details, and within minutes, she'd pulled up our joint trust agreement. The one Allison had signed without reading when we refinanced the house to pay for her failed interior design business. There it was, buried in Section 12. A debt consolidation clause that allowed either party to activate liens against jointly held property in case of marital dissolution or abandonment. I'd written that clause myself, using language I'd learned from watching dozens of divorce cases. At the time, I told Allison it was standard legal protection. She'd rolled her eyes and signed it, more interested in planning her business launch than understanding our financial agreements. That afternoon, I stopped by Benjamin's school to watch his baseball practice. My son was pitching, throwing fastballs with the same focused intensity I'd taught him when he was 8. He spotted me in the stands and waved between innings. "Dad," Benjamin called out after practice, jogging over with his gear bag. "Mom said you might not make it today." "Why would she say that?" I asked, helping him load his equipment into my truck. Benjamin shrugged. "She's been saying weird stuff lately. Like you've been working too much, not paying attention to family stuff." I started the engine and pulled out of the school parking lot. "What do you think, Ben? Do I work too much?" "You work hard," Benjamin said carefully. "But you're always here when it matters. Unlike some parents." Smart kid. He noticed things too. That evening, while Allison was upstairs on a video call with her photography group, I sat in my home office and began phase 1 of my exit strategy. I opened new accounts, transferred funds, and made arrangements that would take weeks to discover. If Allison thought I was invisible now, she was about to learn the difference between being ignored and being truly gone. Dorothy Hartwell had lived next door for 23 years, and nothing happened on Maple Ridge without her knowing about it. The 72-year-old retired judge had sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of legal mind that could spot trouble from 3 blocks away. I was trimming hedges Saturday morning when she appeared at our shared fence, coffee mug in hand. "Michael," Dorothy said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. "We need to talk." I set down my hedge trimmer and walked over. Dorothy had always been friendly, but formal. This felt different. "That young man who's been visiting your wife," Dorothy continued without preamble. "Chandler Nash. He's been parking in your driveway when you're at work." My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. "I see. 3 times this week," Dorothy said, sipping her coffee. "Stays about 2 hours each time. Yesterday, I saw them loading boxes into his truck." "What kind of boxes?" "Small ones. The kind you'd use for jewelry or documents." Dorothy's eyes narrowed. "Michael, I've seen this pattern before. In my courtroom, during divorce proceedings. People start moving assets before they file papers." I leaned against the fence post, processing this information. Allison was already preparing for a divorce I didn't know was coming. "There's more," Dorothy said. "Last Tuesday, a woman came by asking questions about your house. Real estate appraiser," she said. But she spent most of her time measuring the yard and photographing the exterior. "Did Allison know about this?" "Your wife was the one who let her in." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Allison wasn't just cheating. She was planning to take everything. "Dorothy," I said carefully, "if hypothetically someone wanted to protect their assets before a potential divorce, what would you recommend?" The old judge smiled grimly. "Hypothetically, I'd say that person should act fast and think like a chess player, not a checkers player. And I'd remind them that in family court, possession is 9/10 of the law." That afternoon, Benjamin came home from his friend's house looking troubled. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Benjamin said, dropping his backpack by the kitchen island. "Always, son. Mom's been asking weird questions about my college fund. Like how much money is in there, and whether I'd rather go to a state school to save money." I poured Benjamin a glass of orange juice and sat across from him. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd rather talk to you about it first." Benjamin studied my face. "Is everything okay?" "Mom's been acting strange lately." "Strange how?" "She keeps having these phone conversations where she stops talking when I walk into the room. And yesterday, I saw her printing out bank statements in your office." Smart kid. He was putting pieces together just like I was. "Benjamin," I said, choosing my words carefully, "if things between your mom and me get complicated, I want you to know that my priority is making sure you're taken care of. College, your future, all of it. Are you guys getting divorced?" The direct question hit me harder than I expected. I've been so focused on strategy and preparation that I hadn't fully processed the emotional reality. "I hope not," I said honestly. "But I'm making sure we're prepared for any possibility." That evening, After Allison had gone to bed early with a headache that conveniently appeared every time I tried to have a conversation, I sat in my office and made a phone call. Dorothy? It's Michael. I need to ask you a favor. Janet Porter had always disliked me, but I'd never understood why until she showed up at my office on Tuesday afternoon. Allison's sister was usually perfectly polished, but today she looked rattled. We need to talk, Janet said, settling into the chair across from my desk. About Allison and what she's planning. I leaned back in my chair. I'm listening. She came to my house last weekend, Janet began, fidgeting with her purse strap. Asked me to co-sign a loan application. Said you two were buying investment property. That's news to me. Janet's face flushed. I figured as much when I saw the paperwork. It wasn't for investment property, Michael. It was a personal loan for $50,000, with our house as collateral. The pieces were falling into place. Allison was liquidating assets, preparing for a life that didn't include me. I told her no. Janet continued. That's when she got angry and told me about Chandler. Said you'd been neglecting her for years, that she deserved to be happy. And what do you think? Janet looked surprised by the question. Honestly, I think my sister is making the biggest mistake of her life. You're a good man, Michael. Better than she deserves. This was unexpected. Janet had spent 15 years treating me like an unwelcome house guest. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because Chandler Nash isn't who he says he is. Janet pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. I ran a background check on him. He's got 2 other wives in different states, both divorced within the last 3 years. Both lost their houses in the settlements. I studied the information on her screen. Multiple identities, a pattern of targeting married women with assets, restraining orders from previous relationships. Allison doesn't know any of this, Janet said. She thinks he's some successful entrepreneur who's going to whisk her away to a better life. Have you told her? I tried. She accused me of being jealous and said you probably paid me to dig up dirt on him. Janet shook her head. She's completely blind when it comes to this guy. I saved the information Janet had shared and thought about my next move. Allison wasn't just cheating with a local nobody. She was being conned by a professional. Janet, I said, I need you to do something for me. Keep documenting everything Allison tells you about her plans. Dates, amounts, anything about property or money. You're going to fight her. I'm going to protect my family, I replied, including my son. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with my lawyer and laid out everything I discovered. The fraudulent loan application, the property appraisal, Chandler's criminal background, and the boxes Dorothy had seen being loaded into his truck. Michael, my lawyer said after reviewing the evidence, your wife is about to become the victim of a very sophisticated scam. The question is whether you want to save her from it or let her learn the hard way. I thought about Benjamin, about the college fund Allison had been asking about Dorothy's warning that possession was 9/10 of the law. I want to protect what matters, I said. Everything else can burn. 2 weeks after Janet's revelation about Chandler's criminal background, I implemented phase 1 of my strategy. If Allison wanted to play games with our assets, I'd make sure the playing field favored someone who actually understood the rules. I started by transferring Benjamin's college fund to a protected education trust that only I could access. Legally bulletproof and morally justified, since the money was always intended for his future anyway. Next, I visited our financial advisor, Tom Patterson, with a story about wanting to diversify our investments. I'm concerned about market volatility, I told Tom, sitting in his downtown office. I want to move our liquid assets into more stable, protected accounts. Tom nodded enthusiastically. He loved conservative strategies, especially for clients approaching 50. Within a week, I'd restructured our portfolio so that most of our accessible cash was tied up in long-term investments with significant early withdrawal penalties. Allison could still access the money, but it would cost her dearly and leave a paper trail that would be hard to explain in divorce court. The beauty of working in judicial enforcement was understanding how financial hiding games actually played out in front of judges. Amateur hour mistakes that looked clever to regular people were laughably obvious to professionals. Thursday evening, while Allison was at another mysterious Pilates session, Benjamin helped me move some of my personal items to a storage unit. Dad, Benjamin said, loading a box of my law books into the truck, are you moving out? Just being cautious, I replied. Sometimes when relationships get complicated, it's smart to secure important things before they can be used as weapons. Benjamin was quiet for a moment, then said, "Mom asked me about that photo album from your police academy graduation. The one with all your commendations and stuff." Interesting. Allison had never shown any interest in my career achievements before. "What did you tell her?" "That I didn't know where it was." Benjamin looked at me seriously. "But I put it in my closet after she asked. Seemed like maybe she shouldn't have it right now." Smart kid. He was learning to think strategically. That weekend, Dorothy invited me over for coffee. Her kitchen window had a perfect view of our driveway, and she'd become my unofficial surveillance partner. "Chandler was here again Tuesday," Dorothy reported, pouring coffee from an antique pot. "But this time he brought someone with him. A woman in her 40s, very professional looking." "What kind of professional?" "The kind who carries a briefcase and takes photos of property." Dorothy set down her cup with a decisive clink. "Michael, they're planning something bigger than just an affair." I pulled out my phone and showed Dorothy the background check information Janet had provided about Chandler. Dorothy adjusted her glasses and studied the screen. "This man is a predator," she said flatly, "and your wife is about to become his next victim. Unless I stop it first." Dorothy smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd spent decades watching justice prevail. "What do you need from me?" The opportunity came sooner than expected. Friday afternoon, while I was serving papers at a downtown law office, I spotted Chandler's truck parked outside an expensive restaurant. Through the window, I could see him having lunch with a professional woman Dorothy had described. I called in sick for the rest of the day and waited. They emerged an hour later, shaking hands like they'd just closed a deal. The woman handed Chandler a manila envelope, and I followed her to her car. Real estate agent license plates confirmed Dorothy's suspicions. I drove home to find Allison in the kitchen, humming while she prepared what looked like a celebration dinner. Candles on the table, good wine breathing, her best dress. "Special occasion?" I asked, loosening my tie. Allison looked up with the first genuine smile she'd given me in months. "Just felt like doing something nice." The lie came so easily that I almost admired her technique. "Where's Benjamin?" "Staying at Jake's house tonight," Allison said, returning to her cooking. "I thought we could have some alone time." Perfect. No witnesses for what was about to happen. During dinner, Allison made small talk about her day, carefully avoiding any mention of photography classes or creative projects. She was practically glowing with excitement about something she couldn't share. "Allison," I said, setting down my wine glass, "we need to discuss your relationship with Chandler Nash." She froze, fork halfway at her mouth. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Dorothy saw you loading boxes into his truck. Janet told me about the loan application you asked her to co-sign. David Kim called me about unauthorized transfers from our accounts." Allison's face went through several emotions before settling on defiant anger. "You're having me watched?" "I'm protecting my family," I replied calmly. "From a man who has 2 other wives in different states and a history of financial fraud." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "That's ridiculous. Chandler is a successful entrepreneur." I pulled out my phone and showed her the background check results. Chandler Nash has been married 4 times under 3 different names. He's currently under investigation for real estate fraud in Nevada. Allison stared at the screen, her confidence wavering. "He's using you, Allison. And when he's done taking everything we've built together, he'll disappear and leave you holding the bag." "You're lying," she said, but her voice had lost its conviction. "Call him," I suggested. "Ask him about his ex-wives. Ask him about the restraining orders." Allison stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to listen to this." "Yes, you do," I said, standing as well. "Because tomorrow morning, I'm filing for divorce and requesting an emergency injunction to freeze our assets until this mess gets sorted out." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You wouldn't dare." "Challenge accepted," I said, throwing her own words back at her. The morning after my confrontation with Allison, I woke up to find her side of the bed empty and cold. Her suitcase was gone, along with most of her clothes and the jewelry box that had belonged to her grandmother. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to stay with Janet while I figure things out. Don't contact me." Classic move. Run away when confronted with evidence, then play the victim from a safe distance. Benjamin found me reading the note over my morning coffee. "She's really gone?" Benjamin asked, pouring himself orange juice. "For now," I replied. "How do you feel about that?" Benjamin shrugged with the practiced indifference of a teenager, but I could see relief in his eyes. House is quieter. That's not necessarily bad. Smart kid. He'd been walking on eggshells around his mother's mood swings for months. I called my lawyer and moved up our timeline. With Allison out of the house, I could implement the final phase of my strategy without worrying about her sabotaging things. Michael, my lawyer said when I explained the situation, if she's fled the marital home, that actually strengthens your position for emergency orders. By noon, I filed for divorce, requested emergency custody of Benjamin, and petitioned for a restraining order to prevent Allison from accessing our joint accounts. The beauty of working in the court system was knowing exactly how to navigate it efficiently. Dorothy appeared at my door that afternoon with a casserole and a knowing smile. Saw the moving truck at Janet's place this morning, Dorothy said, settling into my kitchen chair like she belonged there. Allison looked like she'd been crying. Moving truck. Big one. Professional movers, not just Chandler's pickup. Dorothy's eyes narrowed. They were loading furniture, appliances, even some artwork I recognized for your living room. I felt my jaw tighten. Allison wasn't just leaving. She was stealing. Dorothy, I need another favor, I said, pulling out my phone. Can you document everything they're removing? Photos, license plates, anything that might be useful in court. Already started, Dorothy said, showing me her phone. Got pictures of them loading your grandfather's clock into the truck. That evening, I sat Benjamin down for a serious conversation. Son, your mother and I are getting divorced, I said. The papers will be served tomorrow, and things might get ugly for a while. Benjamin nodded solemnly. Are we going to be okay? Better than okay, I replied. We're going to be honest with each other, and we're going to protect what matters. What about college? Already taken care of. Your fund is protected, and I've set aside additional money for your future. Benjamin smiled for the first time in weeks. Dad, I'm glad you're fighting back. That night, I sat in my home office and reviewed the evidence I'd accumulated. Financial records, photographs, background checks, witness statements from Dorothy, even Janet's testimony about the loan fraud attempt. Allison had wanted to make me disappear. Instead, she disappeared herself, leaving behind a trail of evidence that would follow her into court. The invisible husband was about to become very visible indeed. The process server found Allison at Janet's house Tuesday morning. I wasn't there to see her reaction to the divorce papers, but Janet called me an hour later, furious. Michael, what the hell are you doing? Janet shouted into the phone. Allison is devastated. Janet, I said calmly, your sister committed fraud, theft, and adultery. She's lucky I'm handling this through the courts instead of pressing criminal charges. She made a mistake, but destroying her life isn't the answer. I'm not destroying anything. I'm protecting my family from a woman who was planning to take everything and disappear with a con artist. Janet went quiet. She knew I was right, but family loyalty ran deep. What do you want from her? Janet asked finally. Full custody of Benjamin, return of all stolen property, and a fair division of assets that she didn't try to hide or transfer illegally. And if she agrees, then we can settle this quietly. If not, everything goes public, including Chandler's criminal background and her attempts to defraud financial institutions. That afternoon, my lawyer called with an update. Michael, he said, Allison's attorney wants to meet. They're requesting mediation instead of a court battle. What changed their mind? Probably the restraining order on the accounts. They can't access any money until this gets resolved. Perfect. Financial pressure was always the most effective motivator. The mediation session was scheduled for Thursday at a neutral location downtown. Allison arrived looking haggard, flanked by her attorney and Janet. She wouldn't meet my eyes. My client is prepared to discuss terms, Allison's lawyer began, but she maintains that Mr. Fleming's accusations are exaggerated. I slid a folder across the table. Bank records showing unauthorized transfers, photographs of stolen property being removed from our home, and a full background check on Chandler Nash, a.k.a. Charles Newman, a.k.a. Nathan Chandler. Allison's lawyer reviewed the documents, his expression growing more serious with each page. Where is Mr. Nash now? He asked. Unknown, I replied. He disappeared the day after Allison moved out, left behind a storage unit full of property belonging to other victims. Allison finally looked up, her face pale. That's not true. It's all true, I said, meeting her gaze. The question is whether you want to be treated as his victim or his accomplice. The mediation lasted 4 hours. In the end, Allison agreed to my terms. I kept the house, full custody of Benjamin, and most of our financial assets. She got her personal belongings, her car, and enough money to start over somewhere else. As we signed the final papers, Allison spoke for the first time directly to me. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said quietly. "I know," I replied, "but wanting something different and destroying everything to get it are two different things." She nodded and walked out of my life, as quietly as she tried to erase me from hers. 3 months later, Benjamin and I had settled into a new routine. Homework at the kitchen table, weekend baseball games, and honest conversations about everything from girls to college plans. "Dad," Benjamin said one evening while we were grilling burgers on the deck, "do you ever miss her?" I thought about that question for a moment, watching the sun set over our backyard. "I miss who I thought she was," I said finally, "but I don't miss feeling invisible in my own life." Benjamin nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd learned early that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are the ones who hurt you most. "Challenge accepted, Dad," he said, raising his soda can in a mock toast. I laughed and clinked my beer against his can. "Challenge completed, son." 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my kitchen making breakfast for Benjamin and myself. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, without the constant tension that had defined our lives for so long. Benjamin bounded downstairs in his baseball uniform, already running late for practice. "Dad, can you drive me today?" Benjamin asked, grabbing his equipment bag. "Coach wants to talk to parents about the scholarship opportunities." "Absolutely," I replied, pouring coffee in my travel mug. "How are your grades holding up?" "Straight A's," Benjamin said with pride. "Turns out I can concentrate better when I'm not worried about what mood Mom might be in." We both flourished in the stability that followed Allison's departure. Benjamin's grades had improved dramatically, and he'd made varsity baseball as a junior. I'd even started dating again, nothing serious yet, but it felt good to have conversations with women who saw me as more than furniture. Dorothy met us at the car, carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing her usual knowing smile. "Michael," Dorothy said, "I wanted you to know that Chandler Nash was sentenced yesterday. 7 years for fraud and identity theft. What about his other victims? Most of them are getting some restitution, thanks to the evidence you helped gather." Dorothy's expression grew serious. Allison testified against him. The prosecutor said her cooperation was crucial in the conviction. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that justice had been served, sadness that our marriage had ended so badly, and gratitude that Allison had finally done the right thing. "How is she doing?" I asked. "According to Janet, she's working at a bank in Phoenix, starting over, trying to rebuild her life." Dorothy patted my arm. "People make mistakes, Michael. The measure of a person is what they do after." That afternoon, while Benjamin was at baseball practice, I received an unexpected call. "Michael." The voice was familiar but hesitant. "It's Allison." My stomach tightened. We hadn't spoken directly since the divorce proceedings. "Hello, Allison. How are you?" "I'm calling because I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not for the divorce. We both know that was necessary, but for how I treated you. You deserve better." I sat down at my kitchen table, looking out the yard where Benjamin and I had spent so many evenings talking and throwing the football. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means something. I also wanted you to know that I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I made such destructive choices." Allison paused. "The therapist says I was afraid of being ordinary, so I convinced myself that you were the problem." "We both contributed to the problems," I said, though I knew that wasn't entirely true. "No, Michael. This was on me. You were exactly who you said you were from the beginning. Honest, reliable, committed to our family. I threw that away for the fantasy of something more exciting." We talked for another 10 minutes about Benjamin, about practical matters, about the strange process of rebuilding separate lives after sharing one for so long. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet house and reflected on the journey from that night when she dismissed me as invisible to this moment of honest accountability. My phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. "Practice ended early. Can you pick me up? I have news about the scholarship meeting." I grabbed my keys and headed out to collect my son, the most important person in my life. Challenge accepted indeed. 2 years later, I stood in the parking lot of Benjamin's high school, watching him walk across the graduation stage. Valedictorian, full baseball scholarship to State University, and a young man who'd learned early that character matters more than charisma. Dorothy sat beside me in the stands, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "That boy is going to change the world," Dorothy said, watching Benjamin shake hands with the principal. "He already changed mine," I replied. After the ceremony, Benjamin found me in the crowd, diploma in hand and a grin that could power the whole stadium. "We did it, Dad," Benjamin said, wrapping me in a hug that reminded me he was still my little boy, even though he now stood taller than me. "You did it, son. I just provided backup." As families gathered for photos and celebrations, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the crowd. Allison had come to see Benjamin graduate. She looked different, older, more subdued but healthier somehow. The frantic energy that had defined her final years in our marriage was gone, replaced by something calmer. "Michael," Allison said, approaching us carefully, "thank you for letting me know about the graduation." "He's your son too," I replied. "You should be here." Benjamin hugged his mother, and I saw tears in both their eyes. They've been working on rebuilding their relationship through phone calls and supervised visits. It wasn't the same as it had been, but it was honest now. "Mom," Benjamin said, "Dad told me you testified against Chandler." That took courage. Allison glanced at me, surprised that I'd framed it positively. "It was the least I could do," she said. "I hurt a lot of people with my choices." Later that evening, after the graduation parties and family dinners, Benjamin and I sat on our deck watching the sunset. He was leaving for college in 3 months, ready to start his own life. "Dad," Benjamin said, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom hadn't said that thing about you disappearing?" I considered the question, thinking about the chain of events that had started with those cruel words at a backyard barbecue. "Sometimes," I said, "but I think we would have ended up here eventually. Your mother and I wanted different things from life. The tragedy was that we stopped talking honestly about what those things were." "Are you happy now?" I looked at my son, this remarkable young man who'd chosen to stand with integrity when his world fell apart, who'd thrived in the stability we'd built together, who was about to embark on adventures I could only dream of. "Happier than I've ever been," I said honestly. Benjamin nodded, satisfied with that answer. "You know what's funny?" Benjamin said. "When Mom said nobody would notice if you disappeared, she was completely wrong. I would have noticed. Dorothy would have noticed. All those people whose court cases you handled fairly would have noticed." "Thank you, son. Challenge accepted. Right, Dad?" I laughed, remembering that night when those words had changed everything. "Challenge completed," I said, "and we're both better for it." As the stars came out over our quiet neighborhood, I reflected on the unexpected gift that cruel comment had given us. It had forced me to stop being invisible in my own life and a fight for what really mattered. Sometimes the worst thing someone can say to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. You just have to be strong enough to prove them wrong.